Hello, and welcome to episode Phaneuf.
It's a double Dion! Wham! Wham! Kabam!
Of the Unparalleled Success Podcast. I am your host, Ryan Woods. I am a radio broadcasting student at Algonquin College in Ottawa, and this is the podcast where we talk about all things hockey and specifically the Ottawa Senators. Today, my guest is Colin Cudmore. He's a writer for SilverSeven, Sens, and he does a lot of coverage for the draft. He's good with statistics and math, and he knows a lot about that, so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about his thoughts on the Sens through the first few games of the season, what he thinks about DJ Smith. We're going to talk about some things happening around the league. We're going to look toward the 2020 draft, and we're also going to finish things off, as always, with the Sens nostalgia, where I will ask him what his favorite Sens game, favorite Sens goal of all time is, and if he has any cool NHL players or celebrities that he has met. All right, I'm very pleased to have Colin Cudmore joining me for episode Phaneuf of the Unparalleled Success Podcast. Colin is a writer for SilverSeven and does a podcast of his own. Colin, how's it going today?
Doing very well. Thanks so much for having me on, Ryan.
Absolutely. So we're going to get started with your writing on SilverSeven. If you can tell the listeners how you got started on that website and if you have a favorite piece that you've written.
Oh, so I've been writing for SilverSeven for maybe, it feels like over 2 years now. And I just started writing some fan posts on that site, just weird listicle articles, and I guess they picked me up as a writer and been writing for them ever since. Been a great team of writers they have there. That's my favorite piece of writing. There's been some good ones, but this is a bit of a deep cut. But during the 2017 playoff run, we had a series called Ups and Downs, where every week we kind of do like little 1 to 2 sentence just on every player and see whether they're trending up or trending down or if they're about the same from the past week. And it was 2017 playoff run. Of course, there was the all-in slogan. And so I took on the challenge of having each player's blurb was kind of in a list table format. Each player would start, so first player, their blurb would start with an A, second would start with an L, third would start with an L, and then it would spell all in. It would just keep repeating over and over and over. So it was like this hidden Easter egg within the article that I was able to hide, and a few commenters caught on to it, and eventually that was just a really fun piece to write. So that's one I look fondly back on.
It was, of course, anything from that era, the spring of 2017, Sens fans are going to have fond memories of.
That was a fantastic time to cover the Sens at that time. So.
Yeah. One of your more recent pieces that you started doing this spring, you were really into the draft with the expected draft range.
Totally, yeah. So expected draft range, for those who don't know what it is yet, it is kind of my way of compiling rankings and figuring out immediately which players are kind of steals and which players are reaches at the draft. So each player, for example, I'll have I'm compiling rankings for the 2020 draft already. So, for example, Quinton Byfield, for example, based on the public consensus and my gathering of rankings, he's expected to go anywhere between 1st overall and 4th overall. So that's kind of, if you look at the draft day and say someone takes him 5th overall, then you can say that Quinton Byfield was a steal at 5th overall. So that was my way of developing kind of a method to try to kind of immediately judge on draft day to see where the public consensus falls on players and see which players are steals, which are reaches. And I guess that really helped out with looking at the Sens this year and looking at lots of their picks, and they really went out of range on a lot of players, surprisingly enough, on guys like Lassie Thompson even, who was projected to be like a mid-second rounder. Taking him in the middle of the first round was considered a reach just based on the public consensus. I don't know. I found that was an interesting tool. I honestly didn't expect it to get as much traction as it did. And again, I'm already compiling rankings for the 2020 draft, and people seem to be enjoying those. So, I'll be updating that throughout the year.
For me, one thing I do every year is I project the statistics for every projected roster player in the NHL. and then I sort of like develop a goals for and a goals against to sort of project the standings and who I think is going to make the playoffs. So I know how much that time and effort that takes up. I imagine, like, considering you've already started looking forward to the 2020 draft, it takes up quite a bit of your spare time.
Totally, and it's mostly mathematically based too. I guess if you want to get into the nitty gritty for a little bit, it's one standard deviation from the average ranking based off of a draft value model. So it kind of accounts for it's kind of a draft value curve where players at the top of the draft are definitely worth a lot more than players at the bottom, of course. But also, like, players in the 6th and 7th round are worth about the same compared to players between 1st and 10th overall, who are probably have a bit more of a difference. So it's all mathematically based too. It's not like I'm just picking numbers out of a hat as well. So it's more so just compiling lots of rankings. It's great. We're already up to 45 rankings for the 2020 draft. And I'm vetting. I'm not wetly vetting these rankings either. These are from trusted public sources as well, who are doing their research. And we had a total of 60 rankings last year, and we're already up to 45, and it's only October. So it's pretty incredible to see the hype that's already surrounding this 2020 draft class.
That's impressive. You do a lot of math and, on the computer as well, and statistics. You told me that you're in the math, computer science, statistics program. Is that right?
Yeah, it feels like it just started. Yeah, but it's just starting in math and computer science. So.
Are you hoping to turn a degree from that program into a career involving hockey afterwards?
I don't know. I'm kind of leaving all doors open. It's just starting, but I can't remember who said this, but someone in the analytics community kind of framed going all in on hockey analytics as the equivalent of like an actor moving to Los Angeles. It's really just going all in on something where there really is only a very limited amount of space. But again, hockey analytics is a very growing field, and I've been pleased to make some connections in that field already. So who knows where things go, but it's just the start right now.
Right. I wish you the best of luck in those regards.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. So moving on more to Sens related, you said you already touched on the draft last year, and we didn't plan to talk on this, but you talked about how Lassie Thompson and Shane Pinto may have been a little bit of a reach. With that being said, do you still view the 2019 draft as a success for the Senators?
Not at all. No. I feel like given the picks that they could have made, they passed on a lot of talent, and I know it's still early on in the season, but some of these picks are already looking pretty bad in hindsight. Not that, again, it's not that I have anything against these players. Lassie Thompson's already having a good start for Ilves in Finland, and I'm covering this in SilverSeven. We're doing weekly prospect updates over there, and I'm giving all the love to Lassie Thompson. He has a fantastic shot. He actually leads his team in shots. I mean, he's on a bad team, but he's making the most of it. But again, looking at it's Ville Heinola was taken with the pick right after him, and we're already seeing the waves he's making on Winnipeg. And someone like Shane Pinto, I mean, again, nothing against Shane Pinto, but like Arthur Kaliyev was taking the pick right after him. He's lighting it up in the OHL right now. So, I mean, it's hard to call a draft class like not a success, because they came out. The draft picks are basically free assets, and so getting anything with free assets is generally considered a win, I guess. But I mean, whenever every team is given the same free assets, basically, the Sens really did not make the most of it. And I mean, compared to many compared to what they could have done, they really, in my mind at least, just really fell short this year.
That's an interesting perspective. I agree that there's a lot of disappointment with like the higher end prospects, like more high risk that could have been taken, such as Kaliyev. But I think when you look at the quality that we got, especially with 3 picks in the top 40, and like you said, Thompson's doing very well. So I think they could have done a lot worse as well than what they did.
Totally. I mean, any team could do a lot worse, but at the same time, like, we still have to have standards for these NHL franchises who are pouring countless hours into scouting and to culminate those countless hours of scouting into picking someone like Victor Lodin in the 4th round just doesn't speak like a world-class franchise, in my opinion. And I feel like I've been advocating to hold the Senators to a higher standard for a while now, and that includes their scouting staff. And I know that their scouting staff is definitely held in a pretty high regard amongst their fans. Of course, they've hit on guys like Batherson and some other late-round picks as well, like Christian Wolanin and Joey Decord. But at the same time, like, just looking at the players that they took this year, it was definitely a divergence from previous years in terms of the quality that they left on the board.
I'll definitely agree with you on the Victor Lodin pick. When they made that selection, I couldn't believe it. An overager from Sweden who, like, no points in his time in the Swedish Hockey League.
Yeah, and to put it into perspective, I tracked 60 ranking sources last year. Not a single one had him ranked anywhere. And so for the Sens to see him and take him in the 4th round when they probably could have, no team probably even had him on his draft board, so they probably could have had him for free at the end of the draft anyways.
Like, just giving him a tryout contract.
So yeah, and so to identify him as a potentially draftable player, then to actually draft him in the 4th round. Maybe they had some intel on other teams. Maybe other teams wanted him, but again, like, he's not the type of player that you should be drafting. He's an overager. He hasn't produced anything at the pro level, and I mean, it's already showing this year. I think he had 1 point in his so far this season, and like the Swedish league started far earlier than the NHL. Yeah, one assist in 8 games. Like, and this is a forward we're talking about. He's not a defenseman, so I mean, that pick I think was inexcusable to me. I mean, again, the Sens weren't the only one who were kind of 3D chessing the the NHL draft this year, but again, it's just the type of thing where these are multi-million-dollar franchises that need to be held to a higher standard and actually need to be like taking all this information into account.
Absolutely. Victor Lodin getting roasted on the Unparalleled Success Podcast. You hate to see it.
Nothing against Victor Lodin personally. I'm sure he's a great guy, but yeah, sorry, Ottawa. You kind of blew that pick.
I'll agree with you. So we're going to move on. Hopefully we can get some more positive thoughts in the next bit. What are your general thoughts through the first 6 games of the season so far?
So I've only been able to actually catch about half the games this year, just because of how I know schoolwork is pretty crazy. But it just seems like there's kind of massive gaps in the roster, like, everywhere. And the Sens are playing very kind of. It's hard to describe. Like, their offense can be very quick at times, but whenever that bottom 6 steps on the ice, it just really slows down, and their defense really just is nowhere to be seen at this point. Brady Tkachuk is clicking, which is, like, if we want to talk positives, he's been fantastic. He's driving that first line. With Colin White and Connor Brown, although I think they're in switching out Connor Brown for a couple other players. Anthony Duclair most recently. We'll see how that goes. But the first line's been clicking, and really nothing else, in my opinion, at least so far. And I think it's shown in their early records. So again, I don't think anybody had high expectations for this team coming into the season, and I don't think that early performance has really changed much.
Yeah, no, and not a lot of fans expected it to either. The only big difference this offseason was DJ Smith coming in the new coaching staff. How do you feel about DJ Smith's coaching style from what you've seen and heard about him so far?
I mean, it's still pretty early to judge, honestly. I honestly wasn't too big of a fan of the hire. I mean, he seems like one of those new school guys. Like, he's never coached, been an NHL coach before. He gets to bring in some new ideas, but really he is kind of an old school guy. He really loves that rough and gruff hockey. He coached Toronto's defense and really overplayed guys like Nikita Zaitsev and Ron Hainsey, who ended up coming to Ottawa. So I'm still very skeptical on what he can do. Special teams have not been working out, but again, it's kind of a bit too early of a judgment. And I mean, he hasn't really been given the best roster to work with for special teams either. So, aside from DJ Smith, Jack Capuano has been pretty terrible of a defensive coach wherever he's gone. So like he's actually had like a negative defensive impact wherever he's coached, especially with the Islanders. So to hire him as a defensive coach, I think was super questionable. I think he was actually probably one of the worst possible options they could have gone with. So, again, it's early to judge. I don't have high hopes. Again, expectations really aren't high this season. So even if the Sens finish last place, it's going to be hard to blame TJ Smith for much of it, just because he doesn't really have much of a roster to work with anyways. So I'll reserve judgment for the meantime, but we'll see.
Yeah, that's a good point, to reserve judgment. Like, I remember when Guy Boucher came in, he said, give me 6 weeks. I've got to have my 6 weeks to get my system in place.
Right,
And Guy Boucher is still one of my... I don't put very much of the blame on Guy Boucher for the way that things fell apart. If it wasn't for Guy Boucher's system, they wouldn't have been close to within one goal of the Stanley Cup final. And I don't put it on him for the players not playing his system in the last 2 years that he was in Ottawa. How do you feel about that?
At the same time, I feel like I was definitely a fan of Guy Boucher's system, but at the same time, he didn't really adapt well as well in those later years. And the changing roster just really didn't fit that new mold of the system. So, as much as I was definitely a fan of the system, I mean, it really just wasn't working out for Guy Boucher in the long term. But whether he was actually the cause of that problem, or whether it was just the team trading all their star players, I mean, you look at the balance, and losing guys like Carlson probably has a much bigger impact than what a coach can do.
And especially the culture surrounding the team doesn't help things either with the Uber video, and just the entire culture has been very bad.
Yeah, it was an entertaining year to cover the Sens. I'll say that at least. It was. The past 2 years have been torture for Sens fans. I mean, ever to see it's when all the off ice issues become more prevalent than what's happening on the ice, and when on the ice is also this last place team that's totally bombing. I mean, it's really just it's like the worst combo in the world for hockey fans, and Sens fans have been experiencing it for the past 2 years, which is unfortunate. But I mean, for us covering the hockey team from the outside, I mean, at least it gives us something to write about.
For sure, it's entertaining. That's why we watch hockey to begin with. And although the last 2 seasons and this season is looking like it won't be a success for the Senators, at least there's one man that we can look forward to moving forward. I'm not talking about Alexis Lafreniere. I'm talking about the Dave Smart hire.
Yeah, that was an interesting hire. I'm honestly not sure what to think of it yet. It's just because there's so little details in what he's actually going to be doing. I'm not sure what he brings to the table. I mean, kudos to Dave Smart. I'm sure he's a knowledgeable guy. I mean, he won 8 championships with Carleton.
Maybe 13 out of 20, I think.
13 out of 20. It's incredible. Like the guy knows how to win championships, but I honestly don't know how. I don't know much about Carleton basketball. I don't know if how much his coaching actually contributed to its success, or if it was just a recruiting. I don't know, but if they only hired him because he won a lot, they may as well have hired someone like Tom Brady. Like it just feels weird to hire someone just because they've won a lot when they don't really have expertise in the field. So honestly, I just don't know what he's going to be doing. Maybe he has some intel that I don't know about that he'll help or provide some motivation. I'm honestly totally in the dark at this point on what he's actually going to be doing, but it's interesting. It's intriguing.
Yeah, I just looked up just to stat check that, and it is 13 championships. I didn't want to upset any basketball listeners, but his record was 591 and 48.
That's, oh my god, that's like unfathomable. That's like kudos to Carleton. Like having that much success is no fluke. So Again, I'm not sure how much he contributed to that, or if it was some systemic recruiting process. But
Yeah.
I mean, he was there through all of that. So like having that amount of that great of a record, I mean.
And I laughed when I heard that they hired him. I thought it was ridiculous, but then I thought about it some more, and I figured they're probably not going to be paying him a whole lot of money, and it's not like he's going to be on the bench or on the ice during practices. Just to bring in someone with his thought process to feed off of, I don't think it can hurt at all.
And it sounds just more like a consulting thing, too. It doesn't sound like he'll be in a full-time role or anything either. So if they just bring him in to get his ideas, improve that quote-unquote winning culture, I don't know. It's something.
Absolutely. And I alluded to it moments ago, but with the draft next year, I was going to ask you, what do you think would make this a successful season for the Sens?
I mean, for me, number one priority is getting a good draft pick. I'm full on Team Tank this year. And so if they can secure a top 5 pick in the draft, that's going to make the world of a difference for the franchise. That and the young players taking a step forward. So that'll be a big focus on Belleville, on making sure the young guys are getting proper ice time, getting proper development, and just seeing them improve in all facets of their game, rounding up their game, making sure that they'll be future NHL players, if not currently. So.
Yeah, I've been on Team Tank before, like in 2015 when Ottawa was looking disastrous before the miracle Hamburglar run. That being the McDavid draft year, I was on board then. Luckily, we had the entertaining run. But this year, if we were to end up with the first or second overall pick with Lafreniere or Byfield available, that would be outstanding.
Totally, and I mean, I'm following the 2020 draft super closely this year already, and I've written a bit about it, and there's so much to like about this 2020 draft. It's super deep. Even if the Sens get a 10th overall pick, they'll get a franchise-altering player. It's that good. So, I guess if you look at the San Jose pick as well, I mean, if you want to talk about that for a bit, then I mean, the Sharks could finish anywhere realistically at this point. They haven't had a hot start. If they get hot goaltending, who knows what can happen? Maybe they'll work their way into a playoff spot. But that pick could be anywhere. And
we're cheering against that.
Depends what you think. It depends what your opinions are on Erik Karlsson. But
I was excited for the first 4 games of the season when the Sharks went 0-4. It was looking like maybe the Sens could end up with 2 lottery picks, but now with Marleau in the lineup for the Sharks, they're 3-0, so they've almost climbed back up to 500. So like you said, that pick could end up anywhere.
Yeah, and if the St. Louis Blues taught us anything last season, it's to never count a team out. So yeah,
that's funny because my pick for the Stanley Cup at the beginning of this season was Dallas, and they look like a steaming pile of what to start the season, 1-6-1.
Yeah.
So, but with a coaching change, perhaps they could turn it around and replicate the Blues run last year. Do you have a Stanley Cup prediction early on this season?
I mean, I'm going to go with the Lightning. I know it's a bit of a cheap pick, but they're too good. The Tampa Bay Lightning, they got Braden Point, they got Nikita Kucherov, they got Stamkos, they got Vasilevsky, they got Hedman. I mean, those are all superstars in the NHL. It's hard to count them out at any point. I'm going full on the Lightning this year.
Right on. That I think that many people are going to be turned off from the Lightning if their play that they've shown early on in the season continues, like getting outshot by Ottawa by more than 10 shots, and their star players are not putting up the shot metrics that you would expect of them. Do you think that that's just a small sample size and they're going to turn it around pretty quickly?
Yes. I mean, it's knowing how good these players have been for years upon years, to see them just all have a slow start at the beginning, it's like it feels basically irrelevant. Like, it feels inevitable that they're going to turn it around eventually. They're good players. I mean, it's hard to I'm pretty confident that they'll turn it back on eventually.
Yeah. One comparison that I thought of was Virginia in the March Madness. They were the top seed in 2018 18, and they got beat out by the 16 seed. A huge upset, but just like Tampa Bay and Columbus last year with the sweep. But then Virginia was able to bounce back and win the national championship last year. So perhaps Tampa Bay can use that adversity and overcome it this year in the playoffs.
Nice, yeah. I didn't know that. That's good to know. But yeah, I mean, hockey is such a versatile sport, and things can go one way or another very quickly. And I mean, as we saw last year, the Tampa Bay Lightning had a historically great season and lost in the first round. So, I mean, things can happen in the NHL. It's just really very open. I know it kind of goes back to the phrase "get in the playoffs" and anything can happen. But at the same time, like, so a team as good as the Lightning can kind of really power through that and play the odds. And I don't know. I think they're still they're so good that to me they still have highest odds to go all the way this year.
Absolutely a possibility, and the odds makers would probably still agree with you on that. Besides the Lightning, are there any teams like with maybe younger players, or they had a good off season that you just think that they excite you and you look forward to watching their games this year? I mean,
the Carolina Hurricanes are always a fun team to watch, just because the way they outshoot their opponents like by incredible margins every game, and it's really a treat to watch how dominant Carolina can be at times. I mean, the Edmonton Oilers with Connor McDavid, I always love watching them. And maybe I'm a bit masochistic, but I like watching Vegas too, just because Mark Stone is just such a great player, and I really miss his skill set in Ottawa. And they're also just a fun team to watch as well.
Yeah, I've watched every Vegas game so far this year except for the Arizona one. So that's how I've got a Mark Stone Vegas jersey in my collection.
Nice.
I've also got a Ryan O'Reilly jersey in my collection that I got before they won the Cup.
That's cool. Nice.
Yeah, and considering you also mentioned McDavid in your favorite players, I think it'd be funny if I brought up a trade that I just made with my buddy Ben in our fantasy league. I traded him Mark Stone, Ryan O'Reilly, and Tyson Barrie for Connor McDavid and Miro Heiskanen. Who do you think wins that trade?
I mean, obviously it depends. Is it a keeper league?
No, you get 4 ads per week.
Okay, so I mean, getting McDavid is I think he came out on top on that one.
And I also have Draisaitl on my team too, so
that's sweet.
Rack up every point that they get that they combine on, and especially pick up the power play points. So
for sure, nice.
Mm-hmm. Do you play any fantasy hockey at all, or?
You know, I dabbled in it last year. I actually I never made this public, but I made a model for projecting fantasy hockey points. It's very similar to what Don Lucian does. I don't know if you follow his work at all. I made one that was proprietary to myself, and I got second place in my league in my first year, and then stopped after that just because, I mean, school takes so much time. And so I did fantasy for 1 year, did okay, and I don't know. We'll see. Maybe I'll bring it back in the future.
That covers everything except for the final 3 questions that I have planned. I always like to end off with some Sens nostalgia. So I'm going to ask you, do you have a favorite Sens game of all time that you've either watched on TV or in person at the Canadian Tire Center?
So I'm personally impartial to the Hamburglar run. That was really when I kind of really ramped up my love for the Senators. Kind of started really following all the blogs and all that sort of stuff. So you could really pick any game from that. The one I actually went to one of the games at that time. It was against Washington, where Kyle Turris scored the overtime winner. So that's just one that really sticks out in my mind. So I'll call that one my favorite game.
That was a good one. Like the Sens, if I recall correctly, they were up 3-0, and then Washington came back.
Yeah,
and then
it was definitely quite the atmosphere in the Canadian Tire Center when Turris finally got the OT winner, sealed the win. So
that was the longest breakaway or semi-breakaway of all time. I didn't think he was going to make it down there. I thought he was going to die at the blue line.
This is going to be Turris. The crowd is roaring. He's alone. He can win it. He does.
I was definitely quite the play to remember.
Yeah. Would you consider that one of your favorite Sens goals of all time, or do you have some other favorite ones to talk about?
It's definitely up there. I think going back to the Hamburglar run again, I mean, Mark Stone's goal against Pittsburgh will be forever sealed in history as one of the all-time great goals in Sens history. So that's probably my all-time favorite goal.
I mentioned that on episode 1 as well, that was my favorite.
Yeah, and actually, I didn't even get to watch that goal live. I was watching I only got to see the replay of that. I was out that night, but just even the replay experience was so mesmerizing that it's just stuck in my head forever as just one of those memorable goals.
Every time I hear Chris Cuthbert with the Mark Stone again, it really
Takes the drop. Carlson across. Stone scores. Mark Stone again.
Legendary.
Yeah. And finally, have you met any cool NHL players or celebrities?
So, fun story. I actually used to work at the Hockey Hall of Fame, which was really cool because players would come in and out. Any player who's played at least one NHL game gets in the Hall of Fame for free. So, for events, just in the middle of the day, you sometimes have players walking through. One player was Patrick Marleau when he was playing for the Leafs. He came into the Hall of Fame, just walked around, met with a bunch of kids. So that was a cool experience. Brian Trottier as well. He was there for a couple events. So got to see him a few times. So yeah, that was cool.
It's cool that you worked in the Hall of Fame. I didn't actually know that if you played even one game in the NHL that you get in the Hall of Fame for free.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so any NHL players listening out there, Scott Sabra, you got your pass to the Hall of Fame now.
Yeah, or even like Corey Locke, if he just walked in, does he have to have his ID on him, or does he just say, "I'm Corey Locke, let me in"?
I'm not sure. I never worked the tickets, so I wouldn't know, but I don't know. Maybe. I guess he could.
That's neat. I appreciate for having you on, and you've got the podcast of your own. Is there anything you've got coming up? Any new episodes of that you'd like to plug?
Yeah, I mean, just follow the podcast on Twitter at CT Pointcast. You can also follow me on Twitter at Cudmore Colin, or just find my writing on SilverSeven Sens. But yeah, I'm always doing stuff, always writing, always covering the Sens, and yeah, it's going to be a long season, so I'll be talking about the 2020 draft a lot too. So look forward to that.
All right. Appreciate your time and best of luck in school this year.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on, Ryan.
I'd like to once again thank Colin for joining me today on episode Phaneuf of the Unparalleled Success Podcast. My name is Ryan Woods. Tonight I will be watching the Sens take on Mark Stone as he will score a hat-trick inevitably against us for the Vegas Golden Knights. Should be a great game. Thank you for listening. Have a good one. And as the